Okay, I see that many people have joined already, so let's start because we do not have much time. My name is Zoran Stamenčić from EISMEA, and together with my colleague Spiridula Vasaku, we will moderate the event. With us are also Benoit Esman and Peter Tsaga from DigiGrow, who will tell us more what is expected under this specific objective that focuses on skills and training. After the presentation, there will be some time left for questions. Please, your questions should be related to this specific objective, and we will try to reply to as many as possible. I don't know if others see the housekeeping rules because I cannot see it. Anyway, to highlight. Basically, the main point of the housekeeping rules are that we will try to answer as many questions as possible. You should put the questions on your in the chat box on your right hand side, and then you can also send your questions to the indicated email, which will also be put into the chat box. But of course, all the questions that you will send to the email will be answered later in the frequently asked questions and not directly here at the session. Finally, just to remind you, we will finish, let's say, in 40 minutes or 35 minutes sharp, so we can all then join also for the closing remarks. So basically, without further ado, I would give the word to Benoit and Peter to start presenting. So please go ahead, guys.
Thank you very much, Zoran. I will start sharing the screen then. So thank you, Zoran, again for passing us the floor. Together with Peter, my colleague, we will address the objective 4. And as you can see already here, I mean, under objective 4, which is about training to foster up and reskilling of the workforce whilst attracting talents, but also on capacity building of clusters and their members, we have actually kind of 2 dimensions. I will be talking about the internal dimension of fostering skills in skills development in or within the cluster organization, and then I will give the floor to Peter to address more the external dimension and going outside the cluster organization when talking about skills. So, as we said in the intro this morning, when we were presenting a little bit the different objectives of EUROCLUSTERS, this part on skills is mainly focusing on, or at least the internal dimension of skills, is focusing on the following action. It's really to build up cluster manager skills to offer better services for upskilling and reskilling and attracting talents. So what we really want to do with EUROCLUSTERS is to continue providing support to cluster organization and their staff. I mean, cluster manager, but it could be even more for the clusters who have more staff than only a simple cluster manager. It's really to continue developing the capacity and the skills of the staff leading the cluster so that they can provide services to their members and that they can swiftly and from a relevant manner accompany and help their members to accelerate the green and digital transition, as well as the aspect of resilience. So for those who are a little bit familiar with what was already being supported under the COSME program, let's say this part is more referring to what we were supporting under the excellence strand of COSME. So basically, in terms of potential, let's say, activities to make a difference between the action of what you could do through this objective, basically, we would like to see you supporting the development and implementation of a portfolio of services for cluster members with regard to up and reskilling, as well as with a focus on the attraction of new talents in SMEs. Conduct training for cluster managers on contingency planning, but also on networking analysis go beyond. This is really open to your own creativity and to your own needs, I would say. It's really about, you are in the best place, let's say, to know what you are needing in terms of skills to address the new challenges that you are facing, to address the challenges that your members are facing. So whatever you are needing in order to better support your members, in order to help your members to strive to become greener, to become more digital and become more resilient, is something that is valuable to be put in the application. Also fostering the involvement of cluster in the Pact for Skills initiative. So that is really linked with the initiative from our colleagues from DG Employment. You may know that Pact for Skills have been launched last year in November in 2020. And the purpose with such activity is really that we would like clusters being involved in the Pact for Skills initiative. There are some initiatives on Pact for Skills for, I think, really all industrial ecosystems. There have been different roundtables that were organized last year with representative stakeholders from the industry, trade unions, etc., to talk about what are the skills that are needed for the future, what companies are looking for in terms of new talents, in terms of new personnel, and really to encourage and to be in line with the green and digital transition. And therefore, I mean, as you are providing a service to your members as cluster, you need also to be able to influence those Pact for Skills, those plans. So it's really about providing you with the necessary means to become involved into that as cluster manager or as staff of a cluster organization. And so to be trained and also to be able to basically advocate the recommendations to be put in the Pact for Skills so that it could benefit your cluster members. And finally, we have the match and development of skills and talents, but I think that was already a little bit covered. So again, really the purpose of this specific action is really to give you the possibility to map, identify, and select what you want to be trained on, how you can see the development of your cluster organization, how you can see the development of your own skills as a cluster manager to be in a better position to address the demand of your members. So it's really up to you to come with the suggestions and what you could be doing together. Also taking into account that we want here to foster also collaboration across industrial ecosystems. So when you are teaming up with other clusters, learning from each other, sharing things together, sharing learning needs together is highly valuable and should be clearly mentioned in the application. On the deliverable, in the end, it's rather clear. I mean, the main deliverable that we are expecting under this first sub-objective of Objective 4 is really to have a proper training map for cluster managers, but I would say even going a little bit beyond cluster managers, so training map for cluster staff. In terms of KPIs, so in terms of key performance indicators, they are mandatory key performance indicators that you need to achieve with this objective. So it's the number of employees in cluster organization which will receive training. So that makes the link with the deliverable I just mentioned. And KPIs which are optional. So we can see here number of training plans supported for cluster and their manager staff and their staff. Number of clusters applying for cluster excellence management label or upgrade. And this is clearly making the link with the new legal entity that has been formed this year, EUROCLUSTERS, who has been taking over the labeling of clusters. So we want to continue providing support for clusters who are striving and looking for excellence, so trying to improve themselves by going for a label or by going for an upgrade in the labeling scheme. In the case that you are deciding in the consortia to run cluster exchange, which will not be anymore a mandatory activity, but which will be optional, there are 2 optional KPIs that are suggested. So to have a minimum of 50 short-term exchanges to be supported per Eurocluster, and to have at least 50% of those exchanges that involve SMEs. So for those who are familiar with cluster exchange, SMEs could be involved either as a hosting organization or as a visiting organization. So yeah, in short, that is a little bit the presentation of the actions, activities, and KPIs you could have, again, relating to the internal dimension of skills in cluster organizations. And now I can give the floor to Peter to take over and talk about the external dimension.
Yes, thank you very much, Benoit. Do you hear me well?
Yes, very well.
Okay, excellent. So as Benoit explained it very clearly, this objective has 2 subsections. The first one, Benoit talked about the subsection that focuses on the skills of the cluster managers. And now I will talk about the second one that is focusing on the skills of the workforce, of the people who are working in the SMEs that are members of the clusters. So maybe we can go to the next slide. First, I will tell you about the mandatory and optional actions, and then I will move to the KPIs and briefly explain them. About actions, we have 1 mandatory action here. I think it's relatively well speaks for itself. So what we want is from the Euroclusters is to establish joint services targeting SMEs for up and reskilling of the workforce and for talent management. Just to dissect this sentence a little bit, I have to emphasize that what we want is that these services are very concrete and very practical. We listed a number of potential options for this, like trainings, courses, recruitment actions, job facilitations. You can pick and select from these, so you don't have to have all of these in your proposal and in your actions. You can choose any of these, a number of them, or you can add further ones. You have to act, you know, on your ideas, what would be beneficial for the SMEs, where the clusters, where the Euroclusters, where the consortium could develop value, and where the services are needed. Another thing to emphasize is, of course, that all these actions, they need to focus on upskilling and reskilling and talent management. The clients must be SMEs. They have to be on the receiving side. It is important that this action is done for the small and medium-sized enterprises who are members of the clusters. So they have to be the direct target of this action. And also we want to emphasize that we need a cooperation element, at least in the development, but also in the implementations of these actions. So what we say is that if the Euroclusters do things together, then it's more beneficial than doing things alone. So there has to be a joint cooperation element when you are designing and developing these services. We can move to the next slide that is covering the potential actions. I can also call them recommended actions. So we identified a number of pathways that you can use to achieve skilling and upskilling. So these are not compulsory, they are recommended. You can, again, kind of an appetizer, what you can choose and select. So first of all, the first one, develop strategies and actions to engage in regional skills ecosystems and also to establish cooperation with educational and research institutions. So here actually this sentence covered 2 things that are also related. First one is to engage in regional skills ecosystems. So we know that there's a lot of initiatives out there on the national level, local level, regional level, city level, that are actually organizing and supporting skills development, upskilling and reskilling in your region. So I think it's very important that the Euroclusters, they look for this, they try to find them, and they become part of them. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, but it's advantageous to join these existing initiatives and participate in them. And the second part of this bullet point, it focuses on establishing cooperations with educational and research institutions. Here it's obvious that having organizations on board. Working together with the EUROClusters is very important. It's very positive to cooperate with universities, with vocational education training organizations, so that these institutions, they are doing something, they are developing young people in a way that they have the necessary skills for your companies, that you are collaborating and getting the right type of supply on the marketplace, and also they can be involved in specific reskilling and upskilling options, for example, in courses, in training. So please try to work together with these organizations that are located around your clusters. The second bullet point, it refers to the European level of initiative, the EU Pact for Skills. Benoit, he already explained what this is about. It's relevant for the skills of cluster managers, but it is also relevant for the skills of the SMEs. So we would encourage you to participate in the EU Pact for Skills. There are these large-scale sectoral partnerships. For example, there are ongoing pretty successful ones on automotives, on microelectronics, aerospace and defense, and further ones will be also launched. Here, the major players of industrial ecosystems are coming together with public authorities. So we see an important role for clusters, for the EUROClusters as well. So we suggest that you make sure that you are joining existing sectoral partnerships, is they already present in your sector, or actually propose or pursue the establishment of new ones. The third bullet points, again, very clear, very self-explanatory. Train the trainer programs. We think that this might be a very helpful and very result-oriented way to work. So, you know, in the who will be working then with SMEs to help their technology uptake, to help their digitalization and their sustainable green business model developments. And finally, the last bullet points refers to the area of digitalization and digital skills. We believe that SMEs are, have to be performing very well in the area of digitalization, and this requires important skills. There are the new digitalization trends, automation, recently teleworking. So it is important that we are helping SMEs and their workforce in upgrading their digitalization skill. So here it's a recommendation to pay a special attention on this field, on this area. That's about the actions. And then the deliverable, again, very simple. I think we want a portfolio of services, exactly in a way that I explained in the previous few minutes. We can move on to the KPIs very quickly. We have again one mandatory KPI, which is we want to report on the number of SMEs that are investing in the development of skills for their employees during the scope of these projects. So we want to see, how many SMEs are actually making progress, achieving progress in skills development as a result of this project. This is mandatory. You need to report on that. And then we have a number of optional, or we can also say recommended KPIs on the next slide. Benoit, if you can move down. So here we have three. One of them is the participation in the Pact for Skills, in how many in the sector of pacts that you are participating in, the engagement of these Pact for Skills. Then we want also to see the number of businesses, SMEs, that are directly benefited from the services that are offered through this project. And also it would be interesting to see how many workers have directly received training and upskilling and reskilling, again, as a result of the joint activities of this project. So these were the actions, these were the KPIs, and I think the presentations are finished from our side, and back to Zoran for the moderation.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Benoit. Indeed, interesting and quite clear presentations. We indeed have some, let's say, around 15 minutes to try to address the questions which already came and are coming. So I'm just going to read out the questions as they came. Try to reply or direct the questions to the person responsible, I think, or best placed to answer it. So the first question is, if our consortium organizes training for SMEs, A, preparation work is considered a cluster cost, B, implementation with an external service provider is SME support cost, and C, implementation with consortium's own resources is cluster cost. On that one, I have to say that we will come back to you in the FAQs. This is a similar question that was asked already during the main presentation, and indeed, the answer was also similar. We want to look at it in more detail and come back to you, so we do not give a wrong answer. That so, Risto, you will have FAQs on that. And then we have the next question. Therefore, the training will be given to the cluster managers that after they will finish the training, give through this project, they will be able to retain and upskill other employees in the SME in question. I don't know, Benoit or Peter, if you want to take that question, if it's clear enough.
I'm not sure I get the question fully, to be honest, but well, obviously, from what I understand at least, obviously we want the cluster managers to be trained, so to develop new skills. And of course, we are also expecting that, well, by acquiring new skills, you will be able also to continue playing after the project is over, to play continuing playing a role in reskilling and upskilling other employees in the SMEs which are member of your cluster. So it's of course not something that will be stopping because the project EUROCLUSTER is stopping, but it's really to give you and to put you in a position to be able to better provide services to your members in the future, in particular in line with the green and digital transition as highlighted in the EU industrial strategy.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's a kind of a train-the-trainer scenario that Marie-Fleur is describing. And indeed, as Benoit said, during this project, cluster managers are coming. We want to give them specific skills through a training, and then they obviously they preserve this knowledge and they distribute it, filter it further down to members of the cluster. So this is obviously a good way, a recommended way, and a necessary way to operate under this objective.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Benoit. And then another question by Marie-Fleur. How many optional KPIs can be listed in the application? Well, there is no limit, basically, depending on your actions. So you can list as many as you want, as long as they don't go over 50 pages. That is the limit. So yeah, so there is no limit for optional KPIs. And then another question, then a question from Colin. Can training activities delivered to SMEs be included in an open call? Part of the call would be dedicated to financial support to third parties and the other part to services delivered by external experts, or which training to improve digitalization skills, for instance. We will come back to you on that one, Colin, as well. It's a bit more complex question, also goes in line with similar questions that were asked regarding the FSTP during the main session. Then we have a question from George. How can EU skills organizations be involved in the projects? Obviously not as partners, but perhaps they can somehow become associated. Peter or Benoit, I don't know if you can provide a reply to that. I personally cannot, and would come back to George later if that's better.
Yeah, maybe a partial answer is that in many cases, EU skills okay, that makes it difficult. I mean, if there would be skills organizations, then obviously these are often members already of clusters, or they cooperate with them, so could be brought into the project. But if you're talking about EU skills organization, then maybe we would need some clarification what exactly you might mean here, unless Benoit, you have a better idea.
I'm sorry, but I was just kicked out of the session, so I needed to reconnect and couldn't therefore. Okay, I see now that George is mentioning CDFOP. Yeah, I cannot really see right now how. I don't think that they could be partner themselves, but I think that you could certainly rely on what they are providing in terms of content or in terms of training, and to use that for the purpose of developing your own skills as a cluster manager, or to use the materials that are being shared by CDFOP to the benefit of your members. I think that should be possible, but then, well, to see how this could work in practice.
Okay, thank you, Benoit. Thank you, Peter. And then we have a question from Branislaw. 50 employees reskilled. Do you mean only cluster managers and employees, or also employees of the members in our clusters, in our cluster?
I'm not sure, again, to what the 50 refers to. I need to quickly recheck on if it's the connection on the KPI that I mentioned, or if it's something different. I think anyway we should make a bit the distinction among the KPIs. When we are talking about KPIs, at least when I was referring to the internal, the KPI, it's more to focus on the staff of the cluster organizations which are benefiting from the training. But then when Peter also mentioned the KPIs on the workers that are benefiting from training regarding upskilling or reskilling, I mean, we are more talking about, let's say, cluster members, and even more largely SMEs, which could be benefited from that. So it's always to be seen a little bit in the two perspectives. Some trainings can focus directly on the cluster staff, on the cluster manager and the other staff of the cluster, and some trainings could be really targeted towards your members. So I would say that the difference in the KPIs should come from there. Obviously, it might also happen that, well, through some trainings that you will be receiving as cluster staff and that you will be using to provide service to your members, it might not be as easy to clearly cut the KPI. But again, it probably needs to be carefully considered when designing the action.
Yeah, okay. I think Ben, I explained it clearly. In subsection 1, it's more the focus on the employees of the cluster, while in the second subsection, it needs to it is also involves the members of the clusters, employees of the members of the clusters.
Okay, thank you, Benoit. Peter, indeed, I think it's quite clear. And then a question from Lydia. Is it mandatory that training activities should be addressed exclusively to SMEs which are member of the cluster organization, or SMEs can be external and outside the cluster's organization? Thank you.
I would say here you can engage SMEs that are inside the clusters, but also others that are outside the clusters. If there's a good reason for them to be beneficiaries of this project, because they are already, although not members of your cluster, but working together in commercial projects with your customer, research and development project. So if there's a good reason to link SMEs that are not members of the clusters to these activities, then I think it can be explained, and it would be a reasonable proposal from your side.
Okay.
And perhaps also just to add on that, because I think the question is quite interesting. I mean, this action is clearly also perhaps a way for yourself as a cluster to promote yourself towards other potential new members that you could attract. So if you are developing actions related to reskilling and upskilling, and that you want to invite other SMEs which are not officially, let's say, member of your cluster, I mean, that could give you also the possibility then to promote yourself and show what type of services you are providing as cluster, and try to attract those SMEs which are not member yet as future member of your cluster.
Okay, thank you very much. Peter, Benoit. Then we have a question. Does it mean that one can apply under the strand of tourism to reskill and upskill the employees of the SMEs in the tourism sector?
Yes, obviously, it's one of the ecosystems, but be careful. As many times it was said during today, you have to have actions in all the 5 objectives. So there can't be a proposal that is only focusing on reskilling of the workforce. You have to tick all the 5 objectives in the tourism sector. So you have to work in 5 different areas with your partners, not just in the skills area.
Thank you, Peter. And then another question, should the training programs addressed to cluster managers be the same addressed to the workforce of SMEs, or is it possible to define training programs according to skills, needs, and gaps per category?
No, this is absolutely the reason why we have these kind of 2 dimensions. I mean, you can have definitely a training program for the cluster manager because, well, you want to be trained on something specific as a cluster manager in order to provide services to your members. But the members might have different, let's say, needs. So you can also have tailor-made programs for your own members that you will be providing per gaps or per category. So that's really the distinction between the internal and external dimension, again, I would say.
Thank you very much, Benoit. We just received an announcement that we should finish now in, let's say, in 4 minutes, because at 12:45 we have to we should join for the closing remarks at the main stage. I don't see any questions anymore, so I would call upon the participants, if you still have some, please go and ask. We still have 2-3 minutes. And as you can see, that the answers are quite clear. So make use of this time. Otherwise, I will close the session. So we have extra 2 minutes for our break, and then at 12:45 we should join the closing remarks. So I will wait now for a minute or 2.
But perhaps, Zoran, it might be worth maybe, because I don't remember whether we really saw the housekeeping rules in the beginning with the address, because I guess that also people might have additional questions coming later on when they will be drafting the application. So maybe we could, well, put again or reshare again. Next questions could be sent in the future.
Yes, I will. So, Spiridula, if you can maybe share the screen, but I will also now put the email in the chat. Yes, Spiridula already did it. So this is the email. This email is also mentioned in the call for proposals. Indeed, if there are any questions that you might have, and just send it there. We will provide the answers in the FAQs that will be published on the Funding and Tenders portal. As already mentioned before, the recording and all the related material for regarding this session will be published on the EISMEA's website, so you can also have a look there. Yeah, we try to answer the questions as soon as we can, but sometimes the questions are complex, so please have some patience with us. But know that we are there. There is a big team behind it. Yeah, so we will try to do our best to be as soon as possible. So. Okay, so I think we can wrap up. Otherwise, I don't know if there is something with that Benoit, Spiridula, or Peter would still like to add. I see that nobody would like to add anything. Thank you very much, Peter, Benoit, for a very clear presentation and for the answers. Thank you, participants, for asking relevant questions. And yes, wishing you all the best with your application, and see you now for the closing remarks. Thank you.